This is the Release and Realization podcast, where we explore emotional freedom and practical manifestation based on the teachings of Lester Levenson and Neville Goddard to help you unlock your inner power and create the life you want. In today's conversation, David and Anna reflect on the life of Lester Levenson and the formation of the letting go method. We're glad you're here. Let's begin.
We are doing a deep dive today into a topic that I think promises one of the greatest forms of liberation that's available to us, and that is emotional release. But the way we're going to approach it today suggests that this kind of liberation isn't really about, lengthy meditation or some kind of abstract spiritual philosophy.
No, not at all. It's about mechanics.
Exactly, mechanics.
What's so compelling here is the sorts of the method we're looking at.
Right.
We're focusing on the work of Lester Levenson, who was fundamentally a physicist.
Yeah.
An engineer.
Which is such a different starting point. He approached the complexities of, human suffering and emotion not as some kind of psychological mystery.
No, he saw it as a system of forces and stored energy that required, a rigorous technical analysis.
He literally treated his own body, which was failing rapidly, and his pretty miserable life as a dysfunctional machine.
That's a great way to put it.
He was looking for the underlying system errors, not just the symptoms. So our mission today is to really explore those foundational insights, to try and understand the physics of letting go.
And we want to see how this method of emotional release is just fundamentally and practically different from the common mistake we all make.
Which is repressing or suppressing our feelings.
Exactly. And I think this is crucial. We'll examine the radical implication of his discovery, the absolute direct link between our inner emotional states and our external reality.
Whether that shows up as our physical health or, and this is maybe surprising, our financial flow.
It's all connected.
And to start, we really have to anchor ourselves in the sheer urgency of his situation.
Yeah.
The origin story here isn't one of some gentle realization over decades. It began with an acute crisis. It was literally a death sentence.
It really was. It was a moment of supreme, unavoidable finality. Levenson was 42 years old.
So young.
And he had just suffered his second major debilitating heart attack. His health had deteriorated so much that the doctors were just blunt.
They gave him a grim prognosis.
They did. He was told he had very little time left to live.
And when you're facing that sort of ultimatum, when the timeline is collapsing, you just lose all interest in temporary fixes, right? Or superficial advice.
All of it.
This wasn't a time for him to go looking for external authorities. It was a moment that demanded intense, critical, and objective self-examination.
He knew he had nothing left to lose.
Nothing at all.
Exactly. And he'd had considerable material success in his life, but he was chronically unhappy. He was physically broken.
So he used that analytical engineering mindset, the one he'd usually use to solve external problems.
And he turned it inward with absolute dedication. This crisis, it provided the fuel for the intense, singular focus he needed to identify the core mechanism of human suffering.
He decided to find out, with a scientific certainty, what was killing him.
Yes, and the discovery that followed was, it was astonishing precisely because it was so systematic. So when Levenson began this intense self-study, he wasn't looking for some grand spiritual truth.
No, he was an engineer. He was tracking data.
He was tracking data. He was trying to identify a reliable, repeating pattern between his internal condition, his thoughts, his feelings, and his external manifestations of health and happiness.
So what was the critical pattern he identified? I mean, did he just find that happiness made him feel better? That seems pretty straightforward.
Well, that's where the analysis really deepens. He realized that when his life was characterized by what he called positive states, so things like love, acceptance of himself and others, a genuine openness to experience.
Okay.
He didn't just feel subjectively happy, he felt physically robust. He felt light. His entire system functioned optimally.
So that was his baseline, the functional system.
That was the baseline. But the truly profound realization, I think, came from observing the inverse correlation.
Ah, okay.
Yes. He noted that the moments when he was filled with what he called non-loving emotions, fear, intense anger, resistance to what was happening, or just a pervasive, crushing sense of lack, those were the moments that coincided directly with him becoming demonstrably unhappy, anxious, and most critically, physically ill.
So he saw this as a reliable, predictable relationship.
A predictable relationship in the mechanics of his body-mind system. Yes.
So he wasn't just saying, oh, negative feelings are unpleasant. He was saying something much more fundamental.
He was saying negative feelings are system-disrupting forces.
A force.
Precisely. And this is where his engineering background really shines through. He didn't label them moral failings or anything like that. He moved immediately to the theory of tension.
Tension.
He concluded that these non-loving emotions, and he listed them specifically, fear, anger, intense guilt, shame, regret, even just the desire to control people or situations.
Yeah.
They weren't just abstract mental incidents. He saw that they were actively creating a measurable, debilitating state of inner tension.
So this tension, then, it's the equivalent of systemic stress on a machine, like running it too hard for too long.
Absolutely. Think of it mechanically.
Yeah.
If you continuously run a machine under excess load, or if you physically grip a muscle constantly in anxiety, you're generating accumulated stress.
Right.
That stress requires energy to maintain, and over time, it must manifest as a system failure or a breakdown. For Levenson, this emotional tension was the direct precursor to physical and emotional imbalances. It became the somatic, the physical manifestation of all that accumulated internal pressure.
So if I spend decades operating from a place of chronic fear, fear of not having enough money, fear of being judged, fear of getting sick, that constant internal resistance is what physically constricts my arteries or damages my immune system. Is that the idea?
That is exactly the conclusion he drew. It wasn't an abstract spiritual ailment. For him, it was a physical law being violated.
Wow.
The body and mind are designed for flow and ease. When you inject resistance, the tension of non-acceptance, you create friction. And that friction eventually leads to catastrophic system failure.
And that completely turns the conventional medical approach on its head, right? Which so often focuses just on the physical symptoms.
It does. For him, the root cause was the internal emotional state, period.
And realizing this, given his imminent mortality, it wasn't an opportunity for some intellectual debate. It demanded immediate, radical action.
The sources say he didn't hesitate for a second. He devoted himself entirely, in real time, to applying this realization.
So what did he do?
He began the relentless practice of consciously letting go of every single one of those tension-generating feelings he had identified as the root of his accumulated stress.
And this wasn't just, a casual hour of contemplation here and there.
Not at all. This was a man running on borrowed time. He was committing days on end to a total internal clean-out.
And the profound physical and mental results that followed? Well, that's what validated his entire engineering hypothesis. It was the ultimate high-stakes experiment.
Okay, this brings us to the core mechanism then, the actual practice. Letting go.
Yeah.
Now, for most of us, when we hear that phrase, it's so easily confused with just ignoring a problem or suppressing an unpleasant emotion.
Right.
But Levenson was absolutely explicit that release is the opposite of suppression.
This clarification is maybe the most critical step in understanding the whole method. Suppression is the active effort to push a feeling down, to pretend it isn't there, or to use mental gymnastics to argue against its validity.
So when you suppress, you're spending energy to fight the internal experience.
Exactly, and that's the very definition of increasing inner tension, isn't it? You're essentially holding the feeling hostage in your own body. Levenson's release demands the opposite. If you feel intense anxiety, you don't fight it, you don't resist it. You remain completely present with the feeling in your awareness.
You acknowledge its presence fully. Without resistance, without judgment, and without the narrative that you shouldn't be feeling it.
Okay, so the feeling of anxiety is present, but I'm not engaging the story about the anxiety. I'm just allowing the raw energy of the feeling to exist.
That is the key distinction. The goal is to allow the emotion to dissolve naturally, not through forced removal, but by withdrawing the attention and the energy that's feeding it.
It's like with suppression, you're using massive energy to push the feeling down.
You're trapping it. You're increasing the overall internal pressure, kind of like putting a heavy lid on a boiling pot. The pressure is still building, it's just temporarily contained.
And the dedication required for Levenson's initial breakthrough really underscores this. We understand he spent days just systematically purging every inner state that did not originate from love or acceptance.
Right. He was addressing the entire inventory of his accumulated emotional debt, not just the emotion of the moment.
He must have realized that sporadic effort would only yield sporadic results.
He did. If you have, say, 50 years of accumulated tension stored in the system, you need a systematic, focused process to discharge it. If a feeling wasn't rooted in his baseline and positive states, he just categorized it as tension generating.
Hey, let it go.
He consciously discharged it, yes.
This helps us understand why our most common coping strategies are really, at the end of the day, doomed to fail in the long run.
They are.
We're experts at using substitute behaviors to try and avoid the initial pain of that inner tension.
Oh, constantly. We constantly seek temporary distraction to suppress feelings. We might eat excessively, constantly check our phones. We engage in obsessive work or use substances like alcohol or even just excessive shopping.
Anything to divert our attention.
And these behaviors offer immediate temporary relief only because our attention is diverted.
It's a temporary pause button, not a real dissipation of the energy.
Exactly. The underlying emotional charge, the stored tension, it remains completely untouched.
In fact, it probably gets worse.
It does. Because the suppression is often fueled by guilt or regret related to the substitute behavior, the total inner tension actually increases in the long run.
Right, you've just layered a new set of emotional costs on top of the original feeling.
Precisely.
So letting go is really the willingness to confront the feeling without that distraction. It means sitting in the discomfort until the energy dissipates on its own.
It is the definition of true emotional hygiene. The emotion is energy, and that energy is demanding release. If you suppress it, that energy gets stored physically and mentally. If you try to run from it with distraction, the energy just waits for you. Letting go means being willing to feel the emotion completely, consciously, without the resistance, allowing that stored energy to finally discharge and leave the system.
And when that energy releases, are there physical manifestations? How do we know the release is successful?
Oh, often yes. Because this process is releasing stored somatic tension, people frequently report sudden, distinct physical phenomena during a successful release.
Like what?
It could be anything. A sudden deep yawn, a wave of heat passing through the body, spontaneous tears or laughter, or even just a sudden, profound physical softening in the shoulders or the chest.
So the body is the ultimate barometer.
It confirms that the energy was physical,
Yeah.
and now it's gone. The body tells you the truth.
Wow.
So the proof of Levenson's theory, the absolute validation of his engineered approach, it lies in the dramatic, verifiable results he experienced.
Right. He was facing a terminal diagnosis.
And through this systematic dismantling of emotional tension, his physical condition started to improve rapidly.
It wasn't just marginal improvement either, was it? This was a man with severe accumulated cardiovascular damage. What actually happened to his heart condition?
His symptoms began to normalize almost immediately. The profound physical imbalances that had plagued him for years, which were the result of decades of accumulated emotional stress and the sympathetic nervous system constantly being activated by fear and non-acceptance.
Right. The fight or flight system.
That system just began to resolve completely. The whole system was recalibrating back to its natural high-functioning state.
I think the most remarkable fact, though, the one that truly sells the efficacy of this method, is the long-term result.
It's astonishing. Following that initial intense period of release, Levenson required no further medical treatment for his heart condition or for any other chronic illness in the decades that followed.
Decades.
Decades, imagine that. For a man diagnosed with a terminal heart condition at 42, that is the ultimate testimony to the power of addressing the root, internal emotional cause, rather than merely treating the physical symptoms.
So his body essentially was just allowed to heal itself once the constant flow of stress hormones, the biological manifestation of that inner tension, was removed.
Yes. He turned off the excessive load warning light on the machine.
The physical constriction caused by all that fear and anger and anxiety, it just vanished.
It did. And without the internal tension gripping the system, the body's natural intelligence for health and balance just took over. He didn't introduce some external fix. He simply removed the internal resistance that was generating the illness.
But the transformation, according to the sources, it didn't stop there. This inner freedom wasn't siloed off.
Right.
It profoundly impacted all the other areas of his life, specifically the very practical and sometimes very painful matter of his financial well-being.
And this is such a crucial point for anyone listening. Before this deep emotional clean-out, Levenson had often struggled financially.
Which makes sense. Financial struggle is so often a direct reflection of an internal emotional program dominated by fear, lack, and attachment to security.
That's it, exactly.
So as he released the intense internal blocks, the fear of scarcity, the need for absolute financial control, the external financial struggles just harmonized naturally without him striving harder.
That is the key counterintuitive insight. He didn't suddenly become a financial genius by, manipulating the markets. He achieved financial harmony not by forceful striving, but by allowing the inner resistance surrounding money and security to fall away.
It makes sense. If I'm constantly operating from a place of desperation and fear of lack, my decisions will be cloudy. They'll be reactive and often disastrous.
Of course.
I'm making choices based on avoiding fear, not seizing opportunity.
Exactly. When the intense inner pressure and fear surrounding his financial future, his attachment to security, when that dissolved, his external actions became fundamentally clearer, less desperate, and objectively more effective.
The flow of life, whether it's financial opportunity or creative ideas, it improves naturally when the internal static and clogs are removed.
Right. Resistance is the true internal barrier to external success.
So when you stop fighting the present reality, you stop using up massive amounts of internal energy on that resistance. And that energy is then naturally freed up for clarity, for insightful action, and for constructive engagement with the world.
To really grasp the practical application of letting go, Levenson offered a powerful and really an extremely modern analogy. The concept that the mind operates, in many functional ways, like a computer. And this analogy is essential for providing a relatable mechanical framework for understanding thought, emotion, and consciousness.
I find this concept so helpful because it completely demystifies the drama of consciousness. A computer just runs programs, and those programs determine its output.
And our mind runs programs, deeply embedded narratives, beliefs, emotional response loops.
So when we talk about feeling chronic insecurity or repeating the internal mantra, I am ill or I'm not worthy of love, those aren't just random thoughts.
No. Those are deeply embedded programs running in the background, often inherited from childhood or wired through some kind of trauma.
And just like a computer program, the mind operates on a powerful and often invisible reinforcement loop.
Yes. What we repeatedly focus on, what we repeatedly tell ourselves, whether we do it consciously or subconsciously, it becomes powerfully reinforced.
So if the background program is constantly running the loop that says, I have a problem, or I always fail,
that program keeps demanding processing power. It keeps returning to the forefront of your consciousness as a perceived reality.
So if I spend years telling myself I'm a victim of circumstances, the mind, acting like a computer following instructions, just reinforces the neural pathways associated with victimhood. And that makes it easier and faster to access that program the next time a challenge arises.
And this is where the power of our attention becomes the central lever. In this computer analogy, attention is the energy source. Attention is the operating power we supply.
Okay.
The more processing power we give to these negative, restrictive narratives, the more we loop that story in our minds, the deeper they embed themselves and the more real they feel.
So we are often completely unknowingly using our most valuable resource, our focused attention, to constantly run and power the very programs we desperately want to stop.
That's it. The feeling of being stuck or incapable of change is simply the subjective experience of a powerful, looping, reinforced program that we are unwilling or unable to turn off.
Because we're constantly affirming its existence with our attention.
Exactly. The belief is perpetually reaffirmed by our decision to hold it in our awareness, making it feel like an unshakable, hardwired truth.
So if that is the problem, the mechanism of letting go is the solution, and it's based on conscious attention management.
It is. When we choose to let go of a feeling or a thought, when we consciously withdraw the energy of our attention from it, we are essentially starving that program of its power source.
We're not fighting the program.
We are refusing to validate it.
So what happens when that program is starved of attention?
It's a process of gradual dissolution. The deep limiting belief or negative emotional loop, it doesn't vanish instantly. But when you stop feeding the reinforcement loop with attention, it begins to lose its power.
Its neural pathways are used less frequently.
Yes, it fades into the background and eventually it dissolves entirely. And that frees up cognitive space or processing capacity for clearer, lighter, and more constructive thoughts.
This is the practical, mechanical way emotional release works on a pure mental level. It gives the individual a tremendous agency. We aren't victims of the thoughts that arise. We are the administrators of the computer, and we have the power to decide which programs receive the power supply.
And Levenson's approach suggests that by controlling our attention, we are effectively performing system updates. We're removing the old, buggy, self-limiting software, which allows the system to run on a much cleaner and faster platform.
The mind's natural state is efficiency.
It is. Resistance and fear are just energy-draining, unnecessary programs.
As Levinson dove deeper into his self-inquiry, he realized that beneath the seemingly infinite variety of human emotions, from mild irritation to consuming jealousy, there was a simple, elegant structure.
Yes.
He found that all negative emotions could be traced back to a very small, manageable set of root causes.
And this is a crucial organizing principle of the entire method.
Mm-hmm.
It takes the overwhelming complexity of our emotional life and just distills it into 3 fundamental drivers.
It gives us a target for release.
It does.
Ah.
Every emotional disturbance, every feeling of lack ultimately stems from attachment to one of these 3 core desires.
So what are these 3 fundamental levers that cause all the trouble?
They are the desire for acceptance, the desire for control, and the desire for security.
That's it. Just those 3?
Just those 3. If you trace back any anger, any frustration, or sadness, you will find it rooted in an attachment to one of those.
Let's dedicate some time to exploring how these manifest in daily life because they are so subtle but so pervasive. Let's start with the desire for acceptance.
Okay? The desire for acceptance is a craving to be liked, to be validated, or approved of by others, or even by oneself.
Mm-hmm.
This attachment generates enormous internal tension. It shows up as shame, guilt, self-criticism, and the fear of rejection.
So if we're attached to acceptance, we can't tolerate criticism.
Not at all. We often become chronic people pleasers, unable to say no, or conversely, we might hide our true selves because we're terrified of potential judgment.
So the tension here is the constant work of managing external perception.
That's exhausting. And what about the desire for control?
Ah, this one's big.
This is the attachment to having things, people, or external situations happen precisely the way we believe they should.
Right.
This generates anger, deep frustration, resentment when things go awry, and often exhausting efforts to micromanage or manipulate others. We feel unsafe or powerless when we lose our grip.
This is why something like a traffic jam or small administrative error can trigger a massive internal reaction in some people.
Exactly. It challenges the deep-seated program that says, I must control my environment to be okay. The tension is the sheer effort of trying to force an outcome that is, at its core, unforceable.
And finally, the desire for security. This one seems linked directly to Levinson's own initial struggles.
Fundamental. The desire for security generates constant anxiety, chronic worry about the future, generalized fear, and financial stress. These are the cravings that make us constantly chase external validation, acquire excessive material wealth, or hoard resources, believing that these external buffers will finally make the inner anxiety disappear.
The attachment here is the belief that the world is inherently dangerous, and only constant vigilance and accumulation will protect us.
That's it. And the crucial epiphany, then, is pinpointing the actual source of suffering within this framework.
Right, because Levinson realized the suffering is not caused by the external world failing to provide acceptance, control, or security.
No. The suffering arises entirely when we cling tightly to these desires. The moment I become attached to the idea that I must be accepted, I've created a vulnerability.
So if rejection occurs, the pain isn't the rejection itself.
No, it's the sudden activation of the intense craving that the rejection failed to satisfy.
It's a self-inflicted wound. The desire itself, the craving, the attachment, the inner tension associated with that demand is what creates the pain, completely irrespective of the external situation.
We can see this so clearly. Someone might have immense financial security, but if they're deeply attached to maintaining it, the fear of losing it, just the mere thought of potential loss, will still cause them immense suffering.
So their internal state is governed by the attachment, not the reality of their bank balance.
Precisely.
And we should probably be careful here not to suggest that acceptance, control, or security are inherently wrong things to pursue or have in our lives.
Oh, absolutely not. It's perfectly fine to prefer a safe life, to seek meaningful relationships, or to organize your environment effectively.
So where does the issue arise?
The issue only arises when we approach those preferences with inner tension and attachment. If you prefer to be in control, but you're completely okay if circumstances dictate otherwise, there is no tension. But if your internal well-being is dependent on that outcome, that is where the tension takes root. And that is the demand that needs to be released.
So we're letting go of the internal demand, not the preference for a pleasant outcome.
That's the perfect way to put it.
Okay, so we've identified the structure, the feeling, the tension, and the underlying desire, acceptance, control, or security. Now, for the practical application, how do we move from identification to actual release? This is where the method's practicality really comes into play.
Right. So the method simplifies the entire emotional release process into two core self-inquiries.
Okay.
And these are not intellectual questions. They're almost meditative tools designed to break the mind's habitual defensive grip on the desire. They force a visceral comparison between the energy state of clinging and the energy state of freedom.
Let's start with the first inquiry. This one forces an immediate confrontation with the perceived threat of letting go.
The first inquiry is, could I let go of this need for acceptance, control, or security right now? This question is designed to bypass the mind's automatic resistance, which always argues that clinging is necessary for survival. Asking what would happen forces the mind to realize that in almost every scenario, nothing disastrous would occur if you simply stopped demanding the outcome right now.
And the relief that follows that momentary suspension of clinging is often palpable.
It is.
And if the answer is yes, I could, what's the next step?
The simple instruction is just to ask, will I? And if the answer is yes, you consciously choose to release the demand, allowing that feeling of lack to dissolve.
And if the answer is no?
You loop back, you ask why, realizing that the resistance is still attached to the desire. It becomes a binary choice. Either cling to the pain or move toward freedom.
Okay. And the second inquiry uses a different approach. It taps into our body's innate system of self-regulation and lightness.
That inquiry is, which feels lighter? Wanting this thing, control, acceptance, security, or simply being present without needing it.
And this is key because the body registers attachment as heaviness.
Always. Clinging, craving, demanding, and resisting are all physically exhausting, tense states.
We physically feel contracted, tight, and weighed down when we're consumed by a craving.
Yes. And when you ask this question, the answer is immediate and visceral. Being present without that demand, even if the external situation hasn't changed one bit, is instantly lighter. It's softer, more spacious.
And that comparison creates a powerful biological incentive to choose the lighter, less stressful state.
It does.
So the entire practice isn't about solving the external problem at all. It's about dissolving the attachment that prevents us from dealing with the problem clearly.
That is the core idea. And this focus on internal release leads directly to the most fascinating and paradoxical result of the practice. What Levenson observed repeatedly was that when practitioners successfully release the craving for control or acceptance or security, those very qualities often begin to appear naturally and effortlessly in their lives.
Why does this paradoxical outcome occur? If I stop needing money, why does money suddenly start flowing? If I stop needing acceptance, why do people suddenly accept me more? It seems strange.
Because the inner resistance has dissolved. When you desperately seek control, you are operating from a place of fear, of tension, and mistrust. That energy creates struggle. It repels cooperation. It fosters confusing, reactive decisions. You are quite literally pushing against the universe.
And when you release the need for control,
You become calm. You become clear and fully present. And in that state of clarity, your decisions are sound, your actions are effective, and you naturally navigate circumstances with ease.
which leads to outcomes that look like control or success, but without the underlying frantic energy.
Exactly. It's not a cosmic reward for apathy. It's that your inner tension is no longer jamming the signal of natural harmony.
So you receive what you need, whether it's acceptance or financial security, not because you fought for it externally,
But because you removed the internal static that was preventing it from aligning with you.
when you're no longer desperate for acceptance, your calm presence naturally draws positive connection.
It's a natural law.
The profound benefit of integrating this method, then, is that the process of letting go gradually shifts. It moves from being a focused, effortful practice to becoming an automatic, natural way of being.
It's a systemic reprogramming.
This is the natural progression toward mastery, isn't it? The more often you consciously choose the lighter state, the more frequently the nervous system just defaults to a state of ease.
And the smaller the accumulated inventory of emotional tension becomes.
And this shift, it fundamentally changes how we interact with our own internal mental landscape.
It does. Attention becomes significantly less entangled in the sticky stories running in the mind, those repetitive, negative computer narratives we talked about.
So instead of being constantly dragged into the loop of, I must get that promotion, or I'm a failure, or I resent that person for what they did, your attention naturally withdraws from that draining mental drama.
Attention shifts overwhelmingly toward presence.
Yeah.
Just the state of simply being.
And this presence is free from the push of attachment and the pull of aversion.
It is. It's simply existing in the now without the added baggage of what should or should not be happening or what should or should not have happened in the past.
And the practical advantages of operating from this persistent state of presence are, while they must be monumental, far exceeding just a subjective feeling of happiness.
Oh, absolutely. When inner resistance is continually removed, your cognitive function improves drastically. The constant noise of attachment, the internal debate, the self-criticism, the anticipation anxiety, it ceases to monopolize the vast reserves of your cognitive energy.
Your mind is simply clearer.
It's clearer, and when the mind is clearer, decision-making becomes vastly simpler and more effective.
You're no longer making choices based on avoiding fear or chasing desperate outcomes.
No. Your decisions are rooted in a calm, rational assessment of what the present moment actually requires.
And perhaps the most tangible long-term advantage is the massive, sustained increase in energy flow.
We stop using enormous amounts of physical and mental energy to suppress feelings, to resist reality, or to frantically chase attachments.
And that energy is immediately available for other things.
For creative action, for deeper relationships, for physical healing, and just for engagement with life in a vital, unburdened way.
So the enduring effects of this practice are increased resilience and genuine self-determination.
Right. You realize that your fundamental well-being, your inner core, is no longer dependent on external circumstances providing you with control or security or acceptance.
It enables us to move beyond being determined by circumstances. Because life will always present challenges. It will always have losses and setbacks.
It will. But the practice allows us to return repeatedly and almost instantaneously to a later, freer sense of being, rather than sinking into the dense gravity of emotional debt.
It gives us the agency to choose our internal operating state, regardless of the external weather patterns.
Yes.
And that ability to choose lightness over tension, to choose flow over resistance, is ultimately the most profound liberation available to us. We began this deep dive with an engineer and a physicist, Lester Levenson, facing a literal death sentence. And we ended with a surprisingly practical mechanical system for achieving radical emotional freedom. His work really seems to confirm that inner tension, the resistance created by fear and anger and the demand for things to be different, is the root cause of almost every imbalance, whether it manifests as cardiovascular illness, financial struggle, or just chronic unhappiness.
I think the ultimate synthesis of this method is that our suffering is overwhelmingly self-generated. It comes not from the lack of acceptance or control or security in the world, but from our clinging attachment to the need for them.
And the systematic practice of letting go is simply the mechanical withdrawal of the energy of our attention from that clinging.
It allows the desire and the suffering it generates to simply dissipate, naturally.
It's a beautifully pragmatic approach that gives us back the keys to our own internal system.
So if the mind truly functions like a computer, running programs based on where we direct our attention, the question for you to consider this week is this. What familiar negative program, that looped narrative of lack or fear or inadequacy, are you currently running on repeat? And how much attention are you willing to consciously remove from it this week, even if it's just for 1 minute every hour, to see if that program finally begins to lose its power and fades into obsolescence?
Thank you for listening to this episode. If you enjoyed the conversation, please consider subscribing to the channel. For more in-depth and advanced content, you're welcome to join us on Patreon. We'll be back next week with the continuation of this topic.